and welcome to another episode of Fkthry, episode 10. We made it to double digits. How you doing today, Mike?
I'm wonderful, as always.
Hopefully our audio is working. We actually switched some things up today. We have compressors and a couple other things that should hopefully give you a nice, consistent audio level, plus no cutouts. Last time we couldn't even hear you last time, could we?
What happened last time?
Remember I was running it live and there was just no audio at all? So hopefully it's a little bit better. Let us know.
I totally forgot about that. Yeah, we switched over to me singing. No one got to hear my beautiful demo of freestyle singing over a drum loop.
Yeah, well, you have that in Ableton, so we have that. But
I'll be sure to upload it as a special YouTube video for everyone. I should do a sample challenge, and I'll just upload that terrible vocal loop and see if anyone can make a song out of it.
Yeah, there's nothing like playing in Ableton and having the sound of your own voice playing back to you while you're also talking, and then so you hear like two versions of the same thing, and it's just
It was actually funny. I was given a job to edit someone else's podcast, so I'm doing some editing for another client or whatever, and there was one spot where one of the guys was just like, yeah, like in the background, but it was like a really good sample of a yeah. And for whatever reason, I had the loop on and it was just like, yeah, 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 yeah. And I was like, this would make a good bass sound. So I actually just like ripped that and put it in my samples folder. And it's like, if I ever use it, they're going to be like, what are you doing? Just
stole like that's my voice. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll be like, it's whatever. I'll give him some royalties on the song or something. Features.
Well, yeah, feature. He's one of the performers. I was gonna say, I mean, after we've done 25 or 26 of these. This is the 10th one we've released, but there's definitely some more content that is lower quality that has never been released.
And some that will definitely never be released. But
some that doesn't actually have any audio, which is really sad. That was my fault again. It's difficult to do this live, so I was gonna say once you get enough content, we could just create an AI that just does this for us, right? We just have enough recordings of everything we've ever said. We just replace ourselves.
Oh man, that just makes me think of the Batman script. Mattress Wayne.
That's one of the funniest things. I actually need to rewatch that. I haven't seen that in a while. This is not pre-recorded. You can actually ask questions if you like, Sean Senpai. We're actually running this live. I don't know if you've seen any of the previous episodes, but Mike's in Toronto and I'm in Vancouver, and we have a little live setup going here, so we can actually do it live.
Yeah, Sean is actually one of my best friends. The last time that I was in Vancouver, I was actually at his wedding, I believe, which was really cool. So yeah, if anyone has any questions for us today, that would be super good. Because we did not plan ahead this time at all. We missed yesterday because COVID makes us sad.
Makes us all sad.
Yeah, no. So we were just kind of busy, but the week before, Joel, you were snowboarding, weren't you?
Yeah, and I think it wasn't it 2 weeks ago? I can't remember if it was 1 week or 2 weeks ago, but I was in rough shape after that. It took me like 3 days. I had pretty severe DOMS.
What?
Have you not heard DOMS?
DOMS?
DOMS.
DOMS.
DOMS. Not like Don's like McDonald's, but DOMS.
No. Yeah, with an M. Like, so what is a DOM? Is that like a medical term for bruising?
Delayed onset medical soreness.
Oh, that's actually a thing.
I don't know. I mean, I just use it. I heard somebody say it once. I'm like, this sounds cool. And if I say it, it makes me feel like I'm cool as well.
Well, it's a pretty quick acronym for something that sounds medically significant.
Yeah, it's when you go for a big old rip and the next day you're like, oh, I feel okay. And then the second day you're like, I can't even move. And you feel like you should be in a cast. That's DOMS. Yeah.
I get that every time I work out. I finally get the motivation and I'm like, I'm going to work out. And I like do a bunch of stuff. I'm like, yeah, that feels great. I'll do this every single day. And then like I wake up the next day and I'm like, I'm not doing this ever again. It's like so much pain.
Yeah, exactly.
So we got some viewers. Please, by all means, someone ask anything of us that you want to know and we'll start going down the rabbit hole.
And it doesn't even have to be musical, but it probably better if it is.
It would help us if it was musical, as far as marketing, but if it's some general curiosity, feel free to ask away. We'll call this a Twitch AMA, if that's okay.
Are you starting to write a song here for us?
I'm working on it. Yes. We'll go with that.
Anyways, your week. I mean, I went snowboarding just a couple weeks ago. I think it was actually 2 weeks ago, and I think your brain has erased the last week of time from your memory. It's been pretty busy for you, right?
Yeah. I've been dealing with a bunch of stuff. Trying to just set up the next year. I've got a couple albums that I got to write. I got some client work as well. Hell yeah. Here we go. Okay, so Joel, take it away.
Yeah. So we've spent a while trying to figure this out. We used to do multi-track recording, which is where you record in any video can actually have multiple tracks. So we'd record them separately.
Hold on. 1 second. I'm just realizing that just for all the YouTube people, we should probably reiterate what the question is.
Yes.
Here's a basic question. Can you explain how to compress vocals and effects chain for podcast and streaming? So yes, Joel, please go ahead.
Yeah, so there's two ways to do it. With us, our main constraint is there's actually two audio sources that are coming in at different levels, and we want them to be as close as possible, but we also want to be able to still control our dynamics. Also, Mike likes to be further away from his mic. I like to be closer. So there's a lot of variables that we have to, work to try to keep it as consistent as possible. The tricks that I used were, there's a Waves plugin called Vocal Rider. You probably could do this with another plugin as well. But I just didn't really feel like messing around. So Vocal Rider is basically just like a guy that you're hiring to just sit on the volume knob the whole time. You basically can give him a range, and in this case, it's plus and minus 12 dB. And then it reacts slowly. So it's basically just a slow compressor that you can't hear. You may actually be able to hear it a little bit if you listen very carefully, but it essentially just rides the fader. And so that's fader meaning the volume level. Sorry, I'm using terminology here. But that goes up and down depending upon the input signal, and it tries to hit a target volume. But the trick is not just using that, because that's a slow reaction that is gonna, when I start talking, you'll notice it starts to come up if I get quieter and goes down, and it's a bit of it's not going to handle the dynamics. And the trick is to actually combine that with a compressor, and it can be really any compressor. I'm running a 6-to-1 compressor with pretty short attack, so I'm actually really trying to get the transients, and that's running before Vocal Rider. And what that does is it allows it, it squishes the short-term dynamics down, and then it allows Vocal Rider to handle the more longer duration volume changes. So say over a second, if I get louder, Vocal Rider is going to maintain that. But if I make a plosive sound, so like a quick snap, that's going to get caught by the compressor. And it's important to have that first. So I have that running on both of our vocals, and then I have another layer running on the master as well. And that's how you can get a decent sound. I found that sometimes we've also had to run it. Just after the fact. We got to process the vocals and fix them after, which is I tried to do as little editing as possible for the show, but there's been a fair bit as we've learned and figured things out.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it makes a lot of sense once we've kind of dialed it in after the fact. But it applies very much the similar concept that you would use if you're trying to process vocals in a song, because out of pretty much all the instruments. Vocals is the most randomly dynamic. I mean, there's a lot of dynamics in guitar, but they're consistent. You've got a loud attack and then it fades out. So most instruments have some sort of consistent dynamic range, where vocals can literally be all over the place depending on how loud the person decides to sing or talk versus how far away they are from the microphone. And so a lot of the time when people want to compress their vocals, they decide that they're going to try and do the entire job with a single compressor. And that's next to impossible unless you're some sort of god at figuring out some perfect settings. But there is no one set of settings that is going to be able to catch all the issues with vocal take, which is to say there's the plosives, which you have to attack, no pun intended, with a different method than you would dealing with a long phrase that has a bunch of vocal dynamics going on. So really the trick is just to use a series of small compressors over and over again, which will slowly over time flatten the signal down. and it kind of creates this seamless compression effect where it doesn't really sound like it's being compressed, because instead of like constantly like hitting the audio down by like 10 dB and then bringing it back up by 10 dB, it's like each one of them is doing like 1 decibel or like a half of a decibel at a time, until the point where by the time it's hitting the last compressor, there's like almost nothing going on, and then you just get this nice constant flat stream of audio. So it's all about the staging of the effects, really.
Yeah, and the trick is that, a good example is something like a gate. If you run a gate, it's very hard to make a transparent gate. And it's because it's such a sharp thing that happens. And then there's so many different types of ways that voices can trail off. So if you have if you make a sound and then trail off really quickly, you can tailor a gate for that sound and it'll cut off decent. But then if you actually kind of have a sound that trails off slower, as it's trailing down, the envelope's going down like this, and then when it hits the threshold, it just drops. And that's unnatural because the tail doesn't sound natural. And I think there are probably gates that are better, that maybe you can have like a logarithmic, curve down, but still it's hard to make it sound really transparent. And the trick is, again, just have multiple of them and have them work in different ways, targeting different parts of the dynamics.
Yeah, definitely. Like gates are one of those things that are always kind of difficult to deal with if you have something that, like you said, has a static ending and also like a long trailed out thing. So like for something like guitar, like it'll sound good for tightening up like any like quick palm muted stuff, but as soon as you try to hold a chord out, it'll be like and just end for no reason when you're not expecting it to. And
then also like fire up again as well as you touch the strings by accident as well.
So actually the Ableton gate is really nice for that, because you can set the threshold to because you can imagine the threshold is like the gate is already closed, you're not playing, and we're going to hit a note now, and it's like, okay, it needs to be louder than this volume in order for the gate to open, right? So that's great. But in most normal, very simple gates, once the volume goes below that threshold, it shuts off. Now the Ableton one actually has a I can't remember the name of it, but it's got a secondary knob. It's on the tip of my tongue right now. It's like the hold, not the hold, but
it's got a backup knob.
Yeah, backup knob. It's like the release threshold is a different number. So what you can do is you can say, okay, don't open the gate unless we go above 10 decibels. But now that the gate is open, once you've played something, then you can set it so that the gate won't close unless it goes under like -40 or something. And then on top of that, you can also set a release time on the gate so that like once it does go below -40, it's not just like an instant switch off. It'll like fade it out gently. And you can dial in the parameters a little bit nicer so that it can accommodate for something that is sustained for long periods of time. Otherwise, you got to just attack the problem by putting a bunch of compressors beforehand. But that can almost make it worse.
It's a really tough problem because, you don't want it to be so noticeable that it takes away, but at the same time you want to have, thick and compressed volume that's consistent throughout the whole time, so that somebody who's listening on their phone speaker or whatever, is going to be able to understand you the whole time without having to constantly adjust the volume. I'm sure you've seen videos where they're produced. I mean, probably some of ours are to a degree, where if you're listening to it on kind of a subpar system, like not really nice headphones or big speakers, when it gets quieter, you just can't, it's unintelligible. So that's kind of the reason for broadcast audio. And another thing, the standard is you generally want to aim for -16 RMS. So that's what we're aiming for. That's a volume standard. So we're just aiming to get that as our level. And then our peaks go up to about -5. So it's pretty compressed in terms of volume. Our I think it's the crest factor. Is that the term? That's like the range between your RMS and peak. I think that's a crest factor of like 11 decibels.
Sure.
So,
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Are you saying crest or crest?
Crest factor.
Crest, not crust.
Yeah, and crest factor, and I think that has to do with, in terms of like the wave cresting, like how sharp the wave crests. And remember how we always talk about square waves versus sine waves? I think it has to do with that. I've actually never really looked into it that far, but it has to do with the dynamics and whatnot. Because if we just turn up our compressors really, really strong and gain it all up, our voices will just be square waves.
Peace out, Sean. Thanks for asking the question. But yeah, back to what we were going to say. The crust factor. It's like when you get to the edge of the pizza and then you don't want to eat anymore because it's kind of stale.
Yeah.
No, there was actually something I was going to say about that though. Oh yeah. Cause like the thing is, compressing the audio is easy. You know, if you really wanted to get a completely flat signal, we could just crank the compressor up to just boost everything that's low and completely flatten everything that's too loud. And like, if I'm lazy, like when I'm doing my own stream or whatever, I just do that because like at the end of the day, I just care that you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth. I don't really care if my mic quality is perfect as long as it's not like total garbage, right? But for something that's like a long form, content thing that's going to be released and people are going to listen to it like later and stuff like this podcast, we want to make sure that it doesn't sound just completely over compressed. And there is something very unsettling about listening to extremely over compressed vocals because it's completely unnatural. Like no one actually sounds like that, like in the real world. You're never going to get that sound in nature, and it's kind of like almost fatiguing on the ears, even if it's at a low volume, because your brain is trying to figure out why there's no actual dynamics in the sound. So really, at the end of the day, our job is to try and compress things as much as we possibly can without ever making it sound like it was even compressed. It's kind of like that episode of Futurama where Bender becomes God, and they're like, if you do things right, no one will know you did anything at all.
Exactly.
Anything at all. Anything at all. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, and it's because it's the exact same when it's not compressed enough. Your ear, it's just as fatiguing on your ear because you're trying to follow this volume level up and then down and then up and then down and then up and then down. And maybe you can't actually hear that well, or maybe your speaker's not as good. So the more compressed we can get it without you noticing, the easier it will be for everybody to listen, and just more enjoyable over the long time. Because there's some stuff that I've listened to and it's like, you're wearing earbuds or whatever, and it just, you like whatever you're listening to, but it's so painful on your ears, or you just feel fatigued. And part of throwing a show like this on while you're driving is you don't want to have to think about it. It's not like an active listening experience. It should be consistent, and it should just, you shouldn't really have to think about it. So,
well, I know a lot of people can probably relate to this, but I find if someone has undercompressed their audio, it's more fatiguing on my finger because I have to keep turning the volume up and down over and over and over again. And so like, that's the last thing I want is like when I'm listening to a video and it's like, the person will be talking at a perfectly good volume and I set it and I'm like, this is the volume I want to listen to it at. And then all of a sudden they trail off and I'm like, okay. And I turn it up and then all of a sudden they play a song and it's like, dun, 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 dun. And I'm like, oh my God. There's like, like movies I think are the worst example of something that was not mixed properly, because they mix it for Dolby 5.1 sound, in a theater, and it's like the dialogue will be at this volume, and like the thing is loud anyway, so it's really quiet dialogue in the actual, like if you looked at the audio, like it's actually, the dialogue's really quiet, but they're playing it at a super loud volume so you can still hear it. And then when the music comes in, it's like it punches you in the face and it's for theatrical effect. But when I'm on my TV listening to this movie and I'm like, I've got it turned up so that I can hear the volume, and then all of a sudden the song comes in and it's like, well, bitches, and I'm like, whoa, like turn it down.
And the best part too is on most TVs the speakers are facing backwards to like your neighbor as well, so it's like this is not an ideal listening situation by any means. I mean, some people have actual stereos at home that or sound systems for their thing, but I feel like most people probably watch movies on their phones now. I'm curious about that statistic, but I'll bet you, I mean, I have a TV and a couch in a living room, and I watch most of I literally sit on my couch with a 4K TV sitting there. I mean, it's not an expensive one, it's some random Vizio thing, but I'm sitting there just like watching it on my phone. And you want to know why? Because I put the phone in front of me and I put it right in front of the TV, and it's bigger. The screen, it takes up more space in my vision than the TV does. And I'm not going to sit cross-legged in front of the TV just to get better view. And it's, I don't know. I'm curious about that fact. I'll bet you people our age.
I'm not going to sit cross-legged in front of the TV to get a better view.
Am I the only one that's ever thought that?
I don't know. That sounds so like first world entitled. I want the TV closer to my eyes, so I'll just pull my phone, my pocket computer out, and you should get like one of those like a hood, and then just like sew fabric to it that comes right. so that all you could see is and then you close one eye so that you have no depth perception, and it'll look like you're in a movie theater, right?
Yeah, except for it'll sound like crap. I was gonna say though, when you're talking about that, so that same TV was the TV that I did use at some point as my computer monitor for about 3 months until I realized that
having it on your desk was not the greatest idea.
You can't use a 55-inch TV monitor as a computer screen.
Just the radiation going into your eyes, like.
No joke. There's a psychological effect to having that much of your visual field filled up with LEDs. I'm not even kidding. It's like fatiguing, and you get like stressed out by having, because it was, it was basically VR, but on my desk. But yeah, I played a bunch of racing games, and I would just get sick.
Yeah, I could imagine that would become a little disorienting after a certain point. Like, I mean, like it would be akin to having the monitor just be this close to your face, right? So like,
well, I sat about a foot away from it, so it was basically, I wasn't cross-legged. I was in a chair, but I was basically doing that, and it's not anybody thinking about doing that. Don't go bigger than 40 inches. Trust me, it's that's big enough.
40 inches is the maximum size for a computer monitor. Anything above that, and it's a movie theater.
Well, I use 27 now, so 27 and 27. Some dude lived in. Yeah, I actually saw that video.
I saw that as well.
It's a really cool experiment.
Someone said some dude lived a week in VR with goggles on. Yeah, said he was dreaming in VR.
Yeah, that's so trippy.
Yeah, I don't remember him saying that he dreamt in VR, but I'm not denying that he said that. I just forgot about that. But that's a super interesting experiment. What are your thoughts on that, Joel?
Because this is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking the next level, because obviously that's a cool experiment, but there are so many more things you could do. So imagine you set up Unreal Engine, and you create a custom Unreal Engine system, which honestly you can do pretty quickly. I don't know if there's Corridor Digital. A guy remade Super Smash Bros. With their characters in a week in Unreal Engine.
What?
Yeah, it's on their Corridor Crew channel. It's pretty amazing. But it took a lot of work. But Unreal Engine's awesome, and you can do it pretty quickly. So imagine creating an Unreal Engine VR experience that you put yourself in for an extended period of time that the Twitch viewers can control.
Oh, dear God. So they can change your environment on you?
Yeah. So there's like polls and things that they can do that are literally is changing your reality. And then you're being filmed, and like the VR experience is going like that right there. I mean, that would go viral immediately. I mean, obviously take a fair bit of work, but
hold on, because the guy who did the VR experiment, didn't he like remake his house in VR so that he could walk around and not bump into stuff?
I think he did. Yeah.
So how would this experiment work? Like, because you wouldn't be able to let like Twitch viewers change the location of like your stationary objects. Would they just be able to change the way that everything looks? Or like, are we going to put this person into like basically like a giant room that they don't bump into stuff in?
Well, I think what you would do is you would have, I mean, if you think about like a game like Left 4 Dead, for example, like obviously there's like the battle scene. Have you played Left 4 Dead?
No, I have
okay,
not.
well, you're playing the game, you're going through a level, and then you always go back to the safe room. So your bedroom would be per se your safe room that would exist in the VR world, and then you could go out the door into the world controlled by the Twitch viewers.
Okay.
And then when you're done, you would go back to your bedroom kind of thing.
My safe place. Some guy online knows how to hack something and just changes your safe place into a scary place.
Yeah. I mean, that would be absolutely insane. I mean, I feel like Twitch would just troll the living crap out of the person, but man, it's gonna happen. Like, mark my words, this will happen at some point in probably the next year.
3:52 p.m. on Monday, March 15th, 2021. Yeah. Joel says somebody's gonna make an Unreal Engine VR Twitch chat control world. Yeah, that's a good experiment.
It's going to happen. Well, I don't know if you've seen people like Code Miko as well, like the VR Twitch streamers, where they're literally, their whole persona is just like a 3D avatar that's fully tracked in real time. I have
seen some of these things where people have 3D avatars, yes. So I didn't realize that it was tracked in real time, though.
It is. So like their facial expressions and all that stuff, I think there are differing levels of how good it is. Obviously mocap is a pretty difficult thing, but if you get that dialed, and they all run it all on Unreal. And so somebody can literally do this by themselves at their house.
So is this humanity's best attempt to make anime girls a real thing?
I think so. I think that's really what's driving it.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Got to bring those pillows to life, right?
Yeah, you want to be able to converse with them. You got to simp to something that's real.
Yeah. It's about as real as cryptocurrency. And we circle back around.
Yeah.
Oh,
but
God.
yeah, no, I think it's going to be crazy, dude. I mean, that kind of stuff, like, just think about how crazy that could be. Like, it's just, yeah, I don't know. It's cool. And I don't know if you've ever seen the things where they actually have the camera, the VR camera. So the camera is tracked as well. And it's not even a real camera. It's just like a piece of wood that's got trackers on it. And it is tracked into Unreal. And it is basically the camera angle. So somebody could be walking around with the camera in the 3D world, and it would show the person in the world as well.
That's interesting.
And they actually use this in movies now as well. So a lot of, actually, this is, man, I don't want to go too off topic here, but there's some really cool stuff with virtual cameras and VR for actual film production. That's how The Mandalorian was done so fast.
Well,
I don't know if you've seen that. They have that big camera disc thing where it's literally like a massive 360 room with things with window.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's like a LED wall. And the whole world is being rendered in Unreal Engine in real time. And then when they move the camera, the entire background is the parallax is shifting in time in reaction to the camera.
Right, because the camera is virtual, right?
No, well, in that case, it's actually physical, but it's being tracked virtually.
Oh, okay, I see. So like when the camera moves, the tracking knows that the camera's moving, and then therefore can replace the background properly.
Yeah, well, it's like, background projection. Like for years, the movie industry has, they will project something on the background, and then they'll film in front of it, and it'll be like, okay, that's what it is. But if you ever see those shots, the camera never moves because they can't change the perspective unless they match it perfectly. But now with Unreal, they can render it in real time as the camera's moving and then film it all in camera. And so the actors actually look like they're in the place that they're filming because all the lighting is natural because they have a 360, it's all the LEDs are bright enough to actually emulate the real life light. I'll see if I can find a link of this and I'll send it to you afterwards. But
so is the room still like a green room though? Like it's like mostly like green screen and stuff,
there's
right?
no green screen at all. So yeah, it would be very disorienting being on set, especially with the camera, like a quick camera pan, because the whole world would be shifting around you and the perspective would change. So it's literally, think about it this way. It's a 40-foot in diameter ring of LEDs that's 10 feet tall. And then there's an opening on one end that the camera looks in. But the thing is, you can take the camera into this world and move it anywhere within the shot. And whatever the map projection of the camera view, that 10-foot ring of LED walls is going to adjust and show the horizon. So they have like a circular area that's the set, and they'll have sand and rocks and whatever is necessary. But anything beyond that wall will be rendered, and then the perspective will be dynamically changing based on the 3D location of the camera.
Right, I see. So what does the actor see then when they're filming this?
So what they would see is the world around them, but projected with the wrong parallax. And they would see it shift. So when you see, remember that rendering thing I did in Touch Designer where the parallax is shifting and it looks really weird? It'd basically be like that as the camera moves.
Interesting.
Or like a painting where, you paint it on the street, and then you can look at it from a specific direction and it looks like it's 3D, but as you shift, it's like, okay, that's not real. But from the exact perspective of the camera, you can't tell. It looks perfect. But from everybody else's perspective, it looks a bit off. But the lighting is realistic.
Can see it. So you can actually see it. Like the rendered world is projected somewhere where like the person who's acting can actually like look at it. It's not just they turn around and they have to imagine that there's like a city behind them when it's actually a green wall.
Exactly, yeah. And what's so important about that, there's a couple of factors. Obviously, it's better for the actors, but on top of that, the lighting is like the reflective lightings, like they don't need to ray trace anything. They just basically project the environment lighting, and you get all the highlights around the face, all the reflections and everything as they would be projected in the real world.
Right, that makes sense.
Because if you do it with VFX and a green screen, you then have to light the character based on their motion within the scene after the fact, which is very, very difficult to do, especially if you start adjusting the scenes. And that's often why we don't like CGI. It's because I think lighting is probably one of the hardest things to do, because you're taking something that didn't exist there and you're saying, okay, let's make it exist in this world. And, you have to do like little lights and you're really just coloring it with paint, basically, dynamically. You say, okay, well, there was a light here, so let's make this part of his face a little bit redder for these couple frames kind of thing. And you have to do that all manually.
Yeah,
which is
it's
like
not exactly the most optimized version of it. And I mean, I remember the first time that I tried to dive into any sort of like green screen stuff like that or whatever, and it's like you instantly run into all these problems, and you're like, oh my god, how do these people make movies? Like, it's actually insane. They do like one frame at a time. Like, every pixel needs to be accounted for. It's like, it's literally the same as writing music, but you've got like 5 other dimensions that you have to deal with at all times.
Exactly. Well, it's just music on steroids. And I mean, I've talked to Lou, my old roommate, and he works for VFX companies, which is why I've been interested in it, just because I've always heard his side of the story. And it's just like they have a role called rotoscoping. And I mean, it's an old school term, but essentially it boils down to paying some poor sap to use paint to just draw masks, and a mask being literally like, you just say, there's the character, like, this is me. I'm going to draw a line along my body for every single frame of the shot. Right. And they'll just spend like 3 days doing like 300 frames for this one scene so that they can fix, or I mean, sometimes not just the body, sometimes just getting rid of some garbage in the scene or whatever because they didn't clean up. But that's the role. That's what I mean, and that's why VFX costs so much. It's just the man hours, right? You got a lot of Photoshop. I probably don't use Photoshop. Oh my god.
So you're actually doing it on Microsoft Paint, like, it's the worst.
Paint's actually super legit. I still use it.
Well, I do too, but I wouldn't use it for that.
We've really derailed this conversation. Is there any way we can loop this back into something musical?
Hey, I mean, it's hard to derail something that never had rails to begin with.
Yeah, we're
not a train, we're a helicopter.
You know what? Helicopters have rails.
What? On
the bottom.
Are those rails, or I thought those were helicopter feet?
I think they're called skids, but they could also be called rails.
I mean, like, it depends what your definition of rail is.
Yeah, it does. You could have a cat named Rail.
I've never seen a helicopter be derailed before.
No, that is correct.
Fine, we're a seaplane.
Yeah, could potentially have rails as well.
Yeah, well, they're floaty rails.
Have you never built a train set on a seaplane?
I can't say I have. But yeah, I do like seaplanes. The one that goes from the Vancouver Island port to Vancouver. That one's great.
It's super musical. They have like a serenading band in the back the whole ride. It's actually pretty amazing.
Well, there's one musical component to it, which is the whatever speaker they use to make the ding for the alarms that happen, which I've told this story a million times, but I love it because there's this one inside joke they never get tired of on the seaplane. It's a 15-minute trip. And it takes 7 minutes to get to your cruising altitude and then 7 minutes to get down. So literally at the exact halfway mark of the trip, you get there and the seatbelt sign goes off and it goes ding and it turns off, and then it goes ding and it turns right back on, and then we start descending, and they never fail to do it, and it's so funny to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, so back to music. I just watched a really cool video about how to use Spectral Resonator.
Was it different than what we were doing? Because we talked about it last time, right? Spectral Resonator, is that the one you like? That's the one you like, right?
I like them all. Don't assume my
all resonators are created equal.
All resonators are equal, 100%. But the Spectral Resonator, we didn't really dive too much into that. We were doing the Spectral Time, but take a look at it. If you sidechain it to have incoming MIDI, you can change it to be polyphonic.
So it's like multiple resonators.
You can play chords with it. You can send chords into it, and it sounds super dope.
So it's like it just literally has more voices.
Yeah, it has up to 16 voices at a time. Yeah, you can send MIDI into it that way. And there's a good video that just came out. It's actually was released by Ableton, so it's like the official video about how to use it. And they run through the whole thing. And it actually sounds really good. I think I'll be using it a lot for making chord patches, like pluck chord patches. It's got a really interesting sort of natural characteristic to it, specifically because usually, like, you know, if you want to make chords sound kind of more natural, you want to adjust the velocity on each note so that it doesn't sound like every single note is being played at the exact same volume, because that sounds unnatural. But now with Spectral Resonator, you can tell it what notes to play, but the volume of each voice in the chord is going to be dependent on the incoming signal,
the velocity
that's triggering it. Exactly. So if you have like a more like bass heavy sound triggering it, then you're going to get a lot of the lower notes. And if you have high frequency sounds triggering it, you'll get the high frequency notes. So the person in the video was using like a drum loop, which is great because then you've got like the call and response between the kick and the snare, and it sounds like the chords are kind of like moving up and down in their tonality during, like, while you're playing it. So it kind of gives you like an immediate human sounding response to the chords, which is really cool.
That's a really good idea. So it's like mapping a chord onto a drum envelope almost.
Yes, absolutely. Exactly. Yeah. But not only that, but you're also taking into account the actual spectral frequencies of the drum
as well. Yeah.
Yeah. You could accomplish the same thing using a vocoder, and then just having it, you know, you could do the same thing with a vocoder if you use like the drums as the carrier and then modulate it with a saw chord patch or whatever. But that's just a couple extra steps, and it's definitely a little bit more difficult to dial in. I feel like the Spectral Resonator thing is kind of just like a quick, simple way to do it, and it also gives you like control in like a lot more streamlined way where you can kind of dynamically like make the sound a little bit more usable right away, instead of dealing with like all the annoying things that come along with trying to dial in a vocoder.
Vocoders have a very distinct sound. It's kind of like a flavor. What's edamame, that flavor, you know, like the really spicy beans or whatever. It's like that. It's very strong, but it has a very specific flavor. Whereas like the Resonator it's funny because I used to try to get similar sounds, but before that existed, and I always just used convolution reverbs at very short lengths. And that's, I mean, I was essentially using reverbs as resonators and then just feeding, I mean, I wasn't feeding rhythms in as like a second layer and then using MIDI to control the patterns. But I've been doing that since, like, when I first started. I was like, reverbs are a great tool for being like, this sound is too clean, and you just run it through, you know, 80% dry wet, which is way more than you would ever normally use, and then just have it at like 10 milliseconds, you know. And the Ableton convolution reverb, which I'm still sad that they don't have those impulse responses from the old one, the Max for Live one in the hybrid reverb, but a lot of those sound
You can
great.
Import them. You can drag them in.
Yeah, but
you can just drag them right in.
They got to have a Rundle Neve. Come on, that's like that is in so many things I've made. I mean, I'm sure it's in a lot of people's stuff as well. It's just, that's such a great impulse response.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it would be pretty easy to get it in there though.
Oh yeah, no, it's dead simple. I think there's a users folder, so you could just put it in like that.
Yeah, just like symbolically link it back to the normal ones. If you really wanted to take a shortcut, just make the users folder, put a shortcut in it back to the normal IR responses from the regular convolution. Yeah. Would that work? Or would it just break everything?
I don't know. I'm kind of afraid of using symbolic links. Remember I did that one time with Serum? Quick tip, right. Don't do symbolic links to Google Drive folders for Serum patches. It will literally break your computer. I don't know what was going on, but I think there's some crazy loop going on, but my computer basically just stopped working until I removed that link, and then it fixed it. But I think I did like a hard symbolic link, like one of the ones you have to use command line for or whatever, but not a good idea. Don't do it.
Yeah, let's not break our computers.
Yeah,
that's counterintuitive.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been in Ableton for a while though. I got to get back in.
Yep. Well, now the Live 11 is officially released. I think we're going to be hearing a lot of new stuff soon. I've been diving into the hybrid reverb a little bit more. There's some really cool sounds in there. There are some really cool things that do some things that you wouldn't expect. If you go check out the experimental folder, the convolution stuff, they've got some really cool things going on in there. So I'm not going to be too specific about it because I want to like use it and release a song using it before everyone else does. So I gotta gotta keep my secrets secret until I make them public, and then I'll tell people my secrets.
I was gonna say the experimental folder, and there's 2 folders at the bottom of the original Max for Live one, and those are great. There's a whole set of chords that you can apply, so you can get like minor 7th chords, minor 9th, like you can get a whole set of chords from a convolution reverb, which is pretty wacky and pretty cool. I actually think the FM notes that are in Lost in Translation. So remember, I wrote the drop first that was just square wave basses, and then I added notes to give it the movement. Right. Those come from that. So that's like that's a Serum FM patch, which I typically don't use Serum for FM, but I think I used a reverb filter a little bit, and then most of it was coming from one of those experimental filters that was like a chord filter, because it was not even a chord sound. It was not a chord sound at all. It was just like a completely broken FM sound, and then I gave it the chords from a reverb sound. And
was I there when you did that?
It's possible. It was honestly a really long time ago, so it's hard to say. Yeah,
you're not wrong. It has been a minute since we did that. But,
a lot of minutes.
But yeah, man, like you'll definitely find like the most interesting sounds in some of the most unexpected of places. So yeah, I guess it's just a matter of time before everyone's kind of explored all the new things, and then we find out what's going on. But I think there's going to be like a pretty big wave of tutorial videos coming out in the next little while of people discovering new and exciting things that we can do with the new Ableton features. So I'm kind of excited for that. I might make some myself. We'll see. If I find anything exciting or worth sharing. I think I sent you one the other day. What was it that I sent you? Someone was it was something to do with the session view. I can't remember what it was. It was yeah, the random chance, because now MIDI input, now you can change the chance that a note will play. You can give it probability. So you can write you could just write an entire chord, like a really long extended chord that goes from really low notes to really high notes, and just play it, and then change all the notes to 50% chance that they'll play. And then instead of getting the exact same voicing every time, you'll get different voicings every single time, which is like, that kind of stuff is really cool.
I actually wanted to touch base on you reminded me as well. What's the name of the YouTuber that did it? He's a really funny guy, and he's basically got a YouTube following where he doesn't do any of the standard YouTube stuff. He just posts like a super raw video that's pretty funny and off the cuff. Can't remember the name of the guy, but he's been posting stuff forever. He's kind of like a Max for Live guru. And I think I'm probably watching his stuff from a while back. He did like a Max for Live visualizer as well, I think.
Yes, that's right. I'm looking for his name right now. So
and the title of that video was the last 3, or maybe not the title, but what the thesis of it was, the last 3 years of work that I just did have been completely thrown away. They're just garbage now.
Why I hate Ableton 11 was the name of the video.
Which is really smart clickbait in a good way. But essentially when he had spent tons and tons of time making all these custom plugins to extend Live to have all this functionality, and now it's just built in. So he's like, I just throw away all this work I did. But I mean, it's worth having it all being part of Ableton. So you're not tacking on some Max for Live plugin that's going to break in a couple of years when you're trying to rely on a live set. But I keep thinking Ned Rush. That's what it is.
Yeah. So everybody check out Ned Rush. He's super awesome. He's one of those guys like Tom Cosm who just does these completely insane things with the Ableton functionality that you would never think to do, and it can definitely help you generate some new ideas for sure. Someone else I found on Reddit actually made a really cool Max for Live patch that I want to get. I don't know if it costs money or not, but I haven't looked into it. It was on my phone when I saw it. But they created an LFO that has 5 stages of parameter values that it will go through. So forget the LFO part for a second. It's basically you can make a slider where you're okay, at the bottom, because how with normal parameters you get a minimum and maximum. You at the bottom it's this value, at the top you get this value. Well, there's also at the middle it's this value, and then halfway between those 2 points there is these values. So you can set 5 points of value along the slider. So if you wanted, as the slider goes from the bottom to the top, you could make a curve that goes like up and down and up again, or whatever shape you want, or you could make it be like an exponential curve, or like an inverted exponential curve if you wanted to, just by setting these slider values. And then not to mention that slider can be turned into an LFO, which then because when you set something to random, like if you set like any LFO that's mapped to something to like random noise or whatever, it doesn't have the type of randomness that generally you want, because like sometimes it'll trigger the same note or the same parameter like multiple times in a row, or it just like won't really be jumping in the way that you want it to. Well, you can set the probability for each value to be whatever you want, so you can make it like mostly stay here and then jump to other places if you want, which would be great for glitch effects. And then you can also set it to never do the same one twice, so you can make sure that it like is actually jumping around properly. And it's like he basically just added a bunch of features to like an LFO that I've always wanted. So I'm definitely going to be taking a look at that. Let me see here. I've got
that's really handy. It's funny because that's it's the Max for Live is, I mean, every time there's a new version of Ableton, it extends what Max for Live can do. And as somebody that's spent a fair bit of time digging into it, not as much as those other guys, but the API has extended. So I've actually spent a fair chunk of time, because I edited the custom one for session, or what is it? The macro variations, and I went in there and I adjusted a bunch of things. I actually looked at the API documentation, which you can get. It's online. It's just a bit of Googling. I think it's probably available now, but during the beta phase, it wasn't publicly accessible. It's kind of difficult to find. But they've extended the API, and the bottom line there is what it means is, when a new version of Ableton comes out like this and the API changes, the API is essentially like, these are all the little things that, people that tinker with Max for Live can plug into and see what they do. And when I mean that, like, part of that is like being able to move around the browser. So I was able to make a Max for Live thing that allows you to move around the browser and like scroll up and down using a MIDI controller, which is kind of handy if you want to use it as a DJ tool. It ended up throwing it out. But the thing is, that wasn't in 9, that was added in 10. And with 11, there's been a fair number of new things. So there's going to be this massive spike of new Max for Live stuff, which has benefits and disadvantages. I've always think back to the lost translation product file and just be like, keep your Max for Live plugins to
a minimum,
to what is necessary, because it can be a real. That's actually one of the biggest reasons why every time I get a Max for Live plugin, I literally open it up, edit it, and I tweak it and make it exactly my own. It's like taking your car and taking it apart and understanding how it works, so that when you're driving, if something breaks, you could fix it.
No doubt.
And that's why pretty much any Max for Live plugin I use, I have been able to adjust or edit or make it work exactly how I want, so that I'm a bit more comfortable with it, especially in a live scenario. Not that we've done anything live for fucking ever.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Yeah. Essentially, when it comes to Max for Live, do a series of stress tests on your own to make sure that if you do put it into a real project, it's not going to ruin the project.
Yeah. Or do the whole sound design in a separate project file and then bring things over, because it's amazing for sound design. That's what's so great about it. You can do things that, you can tweak tools and change things, and, you could download like somebody made a custom saturator, and you can just open it up and change the mathematical values of the saturator. It's like, you can't do that in really anything else.
Nothing else.
I mean, Reactor,
no other program.
But fuck Reactor. Reactor is worse than Max for Live.
That's worse than Max for Live. Reactor is like,
I love Reactor because form is great and stuff, but man, I've never been able to get Reactor to save presets for me. Never. It always fails.
It's definitely it's like the most. It's so funny how counterintuitive it is, because the concept of Reactor is like the most marketable user type thing in the world. It's like, make your own synths, make your own, do whatever you want. But then you get the thing and it's like, what? I'm assembling what with popsicle sticks and glue? Like, it is the most janky program. And some of the patches on it look so bad. It looks like I'm opening up like Windows 91.
There was no Windows 91.
I know.
I was going to say though, the thing with, so I love Reactor. I mean, I I'd say I like the interface a bit more than you. I love the ability of like, it's a bunch of modular blocks and you're like, oh, I need an extra LFO. You just send it in there and you just start using it. And it's got the abstraction, which means like the modules, you don't have to like code how the LFO should work or all the knobs for it. Like it's kind of pre-done, which makes it a bit easier. That's the whole reactor blocks component. But what I really didn't like about it is, say I had a project file, and I've got a bunch of project files that are like this that I'm afraid to open these days. And when you open them, none of the reactor sounds make any sound when you open it. There's no sounds that come out. And then what you have to do is know every channel that's a reactor sound and duplicate it. And then for some reason, it starts working. So why couldn't it do that off the like if it, when it loads the project file, it would work. But the thing is, I have to go and duplicate every one of the channels that's a reactor one, and then the project file works fine. I think I bounced most of those, but that's not an ideal workflow for making music, in my opinion. It's just got to work. You got to be able to save presets.
Yeah, you should definitely never be scared to open up an Ableton project file on the grounds that it may or may not sound at all like what you left it as. But if you're aware that that's something that can happen, then that is enough information, on its own to at least allow you to make the proper decisions as to save or freeze things, in audio form before you close the project file. But it's never fun when you don't know about these things as a new producer. And you're like, yay, I made this thing that I spent like 5 hours on. Like, I can't wait to use it tomorrow. And then you turn your computer on the next day and it just doesn't exist anymore for some reason. You're like, oh, sweet.
Yeah, I mean that's been the biggest. But I've got a song. Remember, there's that one song that I've written. I've written the song 3 times and it's crashed every single time. And we've tried it. We've spent so many times recovering it, and it's because I can't even remember. I made a whole autosave tool for it, actually. And if anybody's interested, I don't know if anybody is an Ableton user, but I created an auto hotkey script that just autosaves Ableton by running the macro, and you can set the time for it. But yeah, that was because I'm bad at saving, and it makes me so super sad. But that song has like, an extra probably 4 or 5 minutes of song that's just gone, that I will never rewrite, because and part of the reason why is I tried rewriting it and then it crashed again, and this is maybe like 3 months later. And when you get to that point, I don't know, this is something that I think some people probably have a better time dealing with than me, but I can't be creative when I'm that frustrated. It's like a block. It's like you're trying to go in and it's like, well, I have so much history with this project file that is very negative, and it's not even a technical project file, which is what's crazy. There must be something in it that's a bug that's just causing it to crash. Yeah. But I've never finished it because, I go back into it and now I'm so pissed at it I can't even write. Someday I'll get over it, but today's not that day.
Well, I'll say there's a certain threshold of how much a person can take when it comes to fixing something. And I feel like this extends even beyond audio and stuff like that. But I'll like firsthand experience, I've had stuff like that happen where I ended up having to rewrite an entire song. And it's like the first time it happens in your life, yeah, it's frustrating. But then you realize the second time that you have to write it, you've kind of got more in your head that let me start over. When you write it the first time, you're still in experimenting mode. So it might take you 5 hours because you try a bunch of things that don't work, and then eventually you find the stuff that does. So you lose all that work, and then the next time you go back into it, you know what worked, so you can actually skip a lot of the extra time, and it will take you less time to rewrite it. And because of your frustration of not wanting to put much time back into it, you will actually end up making decisions faster and get it done like much quicker. And with any luck, and usually, at least in my experience, it ends up sounding better the second time I write it. So not that I'm saying it's a good thing when you lose all of your work, but it can be, you can benefit from it in the fact that you will be able to rewrite it and it'll probably turn out better the second time. That said, if it happens twice or 3 times in a row, there is definitely a point at which you start like not wanting to get, kicked in the nuts over trying to write a song, which I feel like is what happened to you there with that one.
Well, and so there's another factor here I wanted to bring in as well. And it's probably something you don't think of quite as much because you, as a producer, really know what you want, and you are able to basically visualize half of what you're writing ahead of time. Like, the rhythmic patterns, the ideas for the fills, the ideas for the music theory. And I'm getting there music theory wise, but man, rhythmically, I know things, but I'm really not that good at like in terms of planning it out and being like, oh, I know that this is how the rhythm should be. And because of that, and again, I think this is something that any producer that, you know, at varying levels, you know, the producers, when you don't have quite as much knowledge in something like the harmonies or the melodies and whatnot, or that kind of stuff, there are components of the song that are almost entirely derived through chance. And that's what I get really sad about when you lose those, because you know, I don't actually know how to recreate it. And that's part. So this song, when I recreated it twice, it actually was 2 separate songs. I did not recreate it the same way I did the first time because I didn't know how. And then I then was lucky again, and I came up with an even better idea. And like you're saying, it was actually better than the original idea, and I lost that as well. And it was like, oh my! And it's not the whole song, but you know when you're writing a song, and you and for me, and it really is a lot of luck. It's throwing shit against a wall and seeing what sticks, and then something sticks. And you're like, oh my god, that's the rhythm that I would never have just come up with, but I did a delay and then this thing, and then it just that's exactly what it needed. And the problem is when you lose that and you didn't know how you got to it, then you're screwed. And it's the whole idea of like a one-hit wonder, right? You don't really know how to make a hit, but you just stumble across one of them, and then it's like, okay, I got to make another one. It's like, well, I don't actually know what the process is. So
yeah, I mean, of course we can always look for the silver lining, and it's like, if you did it once, you can do it again. Sure. Bottom line, like at the end of the day, if you did it once, you know that you have the ability to find gold somewhere, but it's never going to soften the blow. It's never going to make it hurt less when you lose something that was really good. And like as much as I may or may not know what I'm doing, I'm still guessing just as much as you are, like I'm still always just trying to throw stuff at a wall and see what sticks when I'm writing a song, because like 99% of the time, even if I have a whole idea in my head, by the time I try to write it out, like it never ends up sounding anything like what I actually had intended for it to sound like. Yeah. So yeah, I can see the frustration, and I think, coming back to some of the other things we've talked about in the podcast before, which is just, this is another reason why I love working with audio so much more than I like working with MIDI. Yeah. There's just the inherent even if the project file just never opens again, the audio was still recorded. You can go into your folders and find the samples. It'll be audio 01 dash whatever, and it'll have a date next to it, but the audio is there. You will find it. If
every single dog got deleted tomorrow, you'd still be able to finish it in Audacity.
Yeah, exactly. I could still. Oh god, I wouldn't, but I could. But you could.
But you could. That's the thing, right? You could mix it in hardware, which is really that's the bottom line. Is like, look, we're not tying ourselves into anything, and I think that the longer you spend writing music, the more you realize that those old ideas you had 3 or 4 years ago actually have a lot of value in them, and when you can't go back to them and go get them and pull anything out of them, you're essentially just throwing that away. And that's something I've done for years, and I'm pretty sad about it. And I try to go back now and go back to those project files and spend some time. It can take 3 hours of just stupid work going in and actually, finding a plugin and getting it, tweaked properly, maybe adjusting a couple parameters, figuring out what's broken in it. And then when you get it all done, bounce down to stems, put it in a project file, name it, color code it, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then 2 years down the line, and maybe even cut some of the stems up and use them as a sample pack, like some of that stuff you were doing as well. And then you actually have it, it's really archival. It's really what you're doing, and you're creating, and that's, we talk about creating your own sound. That is like the essence of creating your own sound, because you can make a sound, but if you can't remake it or re-reference it or use it later on, then it's not really your sound. It's just something you made once.
Yeah, exactly. And you're just really not getting as much mileage out of it as you could. It's like, imagine if you bought a car every time you wanted to go somewhere, and you just left your old one sitting there on the driveway, or you lost it. You just don't know where it is. Every time you park your car, you're like, oh, it's gone. Go buy a new one. Like, that's kind of what you're doing. I mean, sure, it's not nearly as expensive. And I mean, that's one of the things we luck out with as producers, is that a lot of our resources are free. I mean, you got to buy some samples here and there, but like, if you can make your own sounds, like, it's free resources, you might as well utilize them to the best of their ability. And I remember reading one thing, I can't remember who posted this. It was like one of those superstar DJ artists who's just like Laid Back Luke or one of those guys. And he's like, every time you finish a song, you like take it, save it into a new folder, collect all and save, name all of your tracks, and then render the entire thing to stems, and then save the stems in the folder with the song, and like have it like that. And like once that's done, you zip that up and put it into your archive, and it's like that is the only way you're ever going to know that your stuff is just going to continue to work. Like I have songs that like shouldn't be corrupt, but I can't open them anymore. Like my Deadmau5 remix that I did doesn't work anymore. Don't know what happened, but some of the sounds just don't sound the same anymore. If I open the project file up, it's just not even close. And so by having
so complicated, you can't feasibly go back in and fix it. It's just basic, like these things get so complicated that you have to do that.
And so like it's really like I was doing half of that work. I would like save it into its own thing and then collect it all, but I wasn't rendering the stems and I wasn't zipping it up. And I'm still like, I still don't do a lot of that as well. But by rendering the stems, that's so handy, because a lot of the time when I'm trying to get a sound from another song or whatever, I'm like, oh, I just need the kick drum from this song or what I was doing or whatever. It's like, okay, if I just go to the stems, it's like, there it is right there. I can just pull it out as easy as I would any sample, instead of having to load the whole project file up and look for it, you know?
And I just thinking about this and my brain's going off on this tangent. So that whole idea of like, oh, just grab the kick sample and maybe the bass sample. What's so valuable about that is that, and it seems super simple, but if you grab the stems directly out of the project file, rendered as they should be, you get the exact volume balance between the bass and the kick, and then you can make the whole song based off it. And the thing is, if you just start with that from a project file that you know works, it's simple, but instead of grabbing, putting drums into a new sample or creating a new operator instrument or dragging it in, you just end up with it mixed already to a degree, and then at least it's a reference point to start with. And then the more tracks and the more ideas and things you have like that, it's like you have, the stems for a radio hit song. If you had those, you can reverse engineer the crap out of that stuff. And why not just do that for yourself? So it's a bit of work, but
And that's the thing. It's like if you start a song from scratch where every single sample or every single sound in the song is from scratch, then the mix is ambiguous as to what you're mixing around. You have to decide which is going to be like the cornerstone of the mix. For me, it's usually the kick and the sub, and you build up from there. And I have my reasons for that. But even if it was something else, like if it was vocals or if it was just the guitar part, if you're pulling that out of a song that's already mixed perfectly, you've removed any ambiguity as to whether or not you need to alter that sound. And so it's easy to mix around that. You could mix down from the vocals if you wanted to. I feel like it'd be difficult, but that's a whole other conversation. But if you have a vocal stem, like a perfectly mixed pop vocal stem, and you're like write a song under it, then in theory you should not ever have to touch that vocal stem, which means that you can use it to reference all of your other sounds. It's like, oh, the vocals are clashing with my guitar part now. Okay, well then EQ the guitar, because that's where the problem is, right? Because you have an answer to this, this vocal stem is mixed properly, so you can work around it, right? So
it's just like mathematics when you have one variable or two variables and you can work to solve the rest of the remaining ones. But if it's all variables, it's so much harder, because you just have to trial and error, or just know as a mixer to get the levels right. But when you have things like that, it's just it's a whole different ballgame. I mean, it makes life a lot easier. And like, I've been trying to do this as well, like, bounce the stems out and whatnot. But I think the trick is like, you almost want to, and this is something that you don't realize when you start. So this is why it's good advice for somebody that's starting to learn as a producer. And I'm talking probably the first 2 years. I didn't do this for probably 4 years, but that's because I'm an idiot. And I also switched from Logic to Ableton. So I basically just threw away 3 years worth of music, but it's trash, so it's fine. I actually exported some of the MIDI files because those were actually, I think that some of those had value, but I don't even have a Mac anymore, so I can't, it's Logic, I can't open it. But I was going to say, you almost want to think of your future self as a collaborator or a remixer, and you want to prepare it as if you were going to send it to a friend. I mean, bonus is if you ever wanted somebody to remix it, you could just send them the stems. But the thing is, in a year's time, 2 years time, depending on how complicated it is, if you're a singer-songwriter, guitar piece with vocals, don't worry about it. But if you have 120 channels, you will have no clue what's going on when you come back to it in 2 years. And you really have to treat it as if you're, somebody who's never seen a project file before. And it's not that much work. It's really pretty straightforward. Ableton makes it pretty easy.
And like even to do it as you're going along, I find that's one of the best things you can do if you're ever getting stuck while writing. Like it's kind of akin to cleaning your room or something like that. It's like, oh, I'm feeling so disorganized. It's like, okay, well, like maybe let's just take a break and clean my room, and then maybe that'll help. It's the same thing with Ableton. If you open up your project and you're like, I don't know what to do next, it's like, okay, well, can we just make it look better? Like, let's delete all the unused channels. Let's name them and color code them. Let's put them in the right order, and then let's group them properly. And then maybe we can add some minor mixing things. And by the time you're done doing that, your project will look so clean and inviting that it'll basically just tell you what you need to do.
Yeah, you're taking responsibility. It's like, you're looking at your project, like, oh my God, this is such a mess. What am I going to do? And then you think, what would Jordan Peterson do? Clean your project file.
Clean your... Perfect.
Awesome.
12 rules for production.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right.
Well, we're an hour in. I mean, that's probably as good a place as any to call it quits.
I think that was perfect.
Awesome. Well, hope you have a good week. I mean, we'll probably talk offline as well, but we'll be back next week. I don't think we even have a plan, so we'll figure out what that's going to be next week. Maybe live again, maybe one of our back episodes. So, catch us next week on Sunday if we're awake.
All right. Take care, everyone. Peace.